How I Drove the Norwegians. Summer of 2007, Bratislava. Any public transit stop. It missed it again. Why do they even bother with timetables if they don't stick to them? Ugh. Finally, here it comes. Seriously? They sent a short bus? How are we all supposed to squeeze in there? The bus is packed to the gills. Despite the open windows and fans, it's probably a refreshing 104 degrees inside. It feels more like a cattle car from Deutsche Bahn than 21st century public transportation. It's one of those ancient corrosive B732S that got a compressed natural gas conversion during its major overhaul. That basically turned a decent bus into the transit equivalent of a cheap, shoddy building. Plain old dangerous to ride. Could you move back a little, please? Move where? I'm standing on one foot here. Don't push me, be a doll. Passengers, compressed into 6 human layers, are giving each other death stares. Some folks with clenched jaws look like human barrels of nitroglycerin. One tiny bump and they'll explode. The gear stick is so wobbly that when the driver shifts into fourth, it bangs against the cabin door. The driver finds this out the hard way when his 2 fingers get caught between the knob and the door. The sound that rips out of him is completely incompatible with the ISO certification the transit company is so proud of. The nails on those 2 fingers are turning purple, but the suffering substrate, the passengers, are smiling. The term substrate originated on a forum where a furious passenger confused it with the official transit website. The drivers themselves call them wolf packs or just wolves. In an effort to get some air circulation, the driver leaves the front door open, which backfires spectacularly when he takes a sharp turn onto Dolnozemska Street. The centrifugal force flings everything from his dashboard out the open door, sunglasses, vehicle papers, and his brand new flip phone, the very latest tech. You could hear the driver scream all the way at the Slavnaft refinery. He slams on the brakes, pulls over, and sprints back. Luckily, everything landed harmlessly in the grass. But if he hadn't answered his phone that day, who knows if the agency would have called him back, and what his life would have looked like next. Good afternoon, Mr. Sokol. Agency here. Our clients have decided to hire you, assuming you're still interested. Seriously? The guy is a comedian. Who would say no? Hey, Peter John. Stavanger. Training. Vad heter du? What is your name? Vad heter Ondrej? My name is Ondrej. We landed on a gray, rainy day. It felt like the whole country was protesting the invasion of guest workers. Waiting for us at the airport were Christian, the NetBus operations manager, and Kjetil, the main instructor for the new hires. Welcome. They took us to lunch first. I thought I was cosmopolitan enough, immune to culture shock. But meatballs with plum jam, that blew my mind. When I worked for the Prague Transit Company, my dorm was a half-ruined concrete panel building with furniture and mattresses left over from the Wehrmacht. The windows leaked air even in summer, and a biology student could write a dissertation on the microfauna in the broken communal showers. Here, the company rented a huge, fully furnished family house. We each had our own bedroom, plus a massive living room and a lounge with leather sofas, electronics, and a million gadgets, a karaoke machine, a turntable, even a collection of antique pistols. The kitchen had all the usual appliances, plus a waffle maker and a milkshake machine. So, what do you think of this place? Ivan was an obese, nearly bald 50-year-old who looked at the world with the pained eyes of a sick basset hound. 30 years in Prague's public transport system had left visible scars. When his bus was jammed during the afternoon rush, with a substrate piling up at the front, Ivan would start politely, "Ma'am, you're standing in front of my mirror," before escalating. "Get the hell out of the way, you stupid jerks. Who wants to look at your ugly faces?" Thanks to his long experience with the human race, specifically its urban representatives, Ivan was the embodiment of pessimism. He had the comical superpower of looking at any person, thing, or situation and instantly seeing the absolute worst in it. This was probably why he was waging an intense, merciless trench war against the riding public. Depressive Marvin the robot from The Hitchhiker's Guide would look like a cheerful TV host next to him. Ivan's reaction to winning the lottery jackpot would be a heavy sigh. Great, all that money, just what I needed. The IRS will eat me alive. You know, those bastards just latch right onto you. The fare system was ridiculously complicated. Aside from splitting the territory between Sands and Stavanger into 5 zones, they had monthly passes, student monthly passes, pupil cards, and something called Flexi that worked like a monthly pass but let up to 4 people ride on weekends. Then there were family tickets, cheap 4-stop tickets, tickets with discounted train transfers. Just don't show the Norwegians, Ivan advised, and he only sold 3 kinds of tickets, full, child, and senior. If someone asked for anything else, he would just wave his right hand vaguely backward and declare, gratis. Or, if he didn't like the look of them, he'd add, go to hell, at the company. They spoke to us as slowly and clearly as possible, but the paying clients didn't have the same restraint. Herravera Sands. Herravera Havera. I only understood that the guy wanted to go to Sands. Could you repeat that, please? Sandy's Havera Havera. When training wrapped up and we finally got our last bits of paperwork, Christian, the operations manager, invited us all to his house for a classic family dinner. It was something I had never experienced before or since, and for us, used to the personnel policies back in Slovakia. It felt like another planet. He seated the guest workers in the living room of his cozy suburban home and introduced us to his wife and son. We had a homemade meal, and everyone was genuinely touched. Even old Ivan, whose emotional thermostat was permanently stuck on miserable, looked moved. Welcome. The following events take place one November Friday. I was slowly trudging into the garage, yawning and squinting at the world with the gummy eyes of a newborn kitten. It was my second week on the job, and I mean on the job. In 4 days, I'd worked 70 hours, lost 5 pounds, my back ached, and I had black circles under my eyes that made me look like Schwarzenegger hunting the predator. My morning problem became clear as I pulled into the second stop. Instead of a normal wave to signal he wanted to board, the guy authoritatively pointed his outstretched arm straight ahead, the kind of gesture you use to teach a dog to beg. I registered the wrinkled, grubby coat, the unkempt, greasy hair, and the stubble. Up close, his neglected look was nicely complemented by body odor, like a month-old dead cat in a barrel of acetone. He was waving an orange card that read, Honor, a senior discount valve for classic, old age, and disability pensioners. I'd already learned that in the most social welfare state in the world, the definition of a disability pensioner was damn broad. It included addicts, alcoholics, other connoisseurs of harmful substances, and plain old slackers for whom work was against their nature. My comprehension of the Vestland dialect was far from perfect. Pardon? Herravera. Jetto had advised us during training that if we weren't sure, we should sell the passenger the cheapest ticket and take the heat if there was control. So I did. I gave him his change and his ticket and expected him to go sit down so I could breathe. Instead, he just stood there, staring. For a moment, I tensed up in my seat, considering tossing him out. I didn't take kindly to being cursed at by some fucking foreigner, but I waved it off. If you let every idiot get to you, you won't last long in this job. That should have been the end of it, if he just sat down and shut up for the rest of the ride. But this specimen clearly decided he was going to make me pay. He sprawled out on a double seat and, with the confidence of someone in his own living room, propped his feet and his dirty boots up on the seat opposite him. When I saw that in the mirror, I saw red and nearly crashed into a traffic light. You moron! Get your feet off. Take your feet down right now. For the next 3 minutes, the passengers were treated to a lecture on social Darwinism. In English, my Norwegian wouldn't have cut it. The impact was slightly diminished by my accent and the fact that I was white-hot mad, spitting the words out through clenched teeth, but I was speaking clearly and coherently, which surprised even me. The welfare case, gaping at me, was informed that his leisurely playboy lifestyle, smelling of cheap booze at 8 in the morning, having never worked a minute in his life, was being financed in part by the taxes paid by me and the other fucking foreigners. In case he hadn't noticed, this was a public bus, not his private Gulfstream 5, and he was traveling on a discounted crippled ticket that was 3/4 subsidized. One more word and he was walking. Clear? He shut up and stared like a mole that had tunneled into a septic tank. The ultimate insult came when one passenger got off. You really told him off, that drick. I was sipping the brown substance the local barbarians called coffee when old Ivan sat down next to me. By then, a nickname had stuck to me. You guys are morons, though I didn't know it yet. Hey, pal, I hear people are saying I'm hustling tickets. They're not saying it. It's generally known. Taking a discarded ticket, reselling it, and pocketing the cash was a quick way for some folks to make extra money. I didn't get why someone would risk a €2,000 plus salary for an extra €2. But then again, I didn't get a lot of things about Ivan. But you gotta tell him I don't do stuff like that. They'll listen to you in that office, right? His round face and sad eyes with a picture of angelic honesty. I was heading out on line 75B, which serviced every backwater hole, turned every 200 yards, and took more detours to its destination than my grandpa's stories. I had only driven it once before, in the opposite direction and in the dark. My objections were met with a reply that if I didn't drive it, the route wouldn't run. Today, I smile nostalgically at the days when emotional blackmail and appeals to professional pride worked on me. My cynical substrate, hardened present self would have told them where to go. I picked up the office workers at Forest and took off. First doubts started creeping in. Should I have turned left back there? I kept glancing at the mirror. None of the passengers looked confused or worried. Okay, I guess it's fine. A moment later, I was pretty sure where I was. Then I didn't have a damn clue again. The scenery felt familiar, but there was a field on the left and a field on the right, and fields aren't exactly known for their variety. I considered swallowing my pride and asking a passenger, but Norwegians are a nation of complainers. I really didn't want to end up as a subject of typical Norwegian sensational journalism, where a full-page photo shows an outraged citizen standing with arms crossed and a scowl in front of the bus, and a headline in huge letters reads, "An untrained foreign bus driver didn't know the route. Terrified children and endangered kittens." I figured out where I was the second I turned right 200 yards too early. Now I was driving across a field on a road so narrow I'd have trouble avoiding a large rabbit. There was nowhere to turn around. I could hear amused whispers from the back. I was sweating like a pedophile at Disneyland. The road ended in a farmyard. The farmer stood on his porch, arms crossed, stared without a blink as the city bus tried to back into the space between the barn and a parked tractor, scattered his chickens. I was finally back on the road. Someone in the back was snickering maliciously. I wished syphilis on him. After one last questionable mishap, I finally hit the main road and immediately got stuck in traffic. I was still stuck in traffic, just 200 yards farther up the road. I wanted to check Facebook, but then I remembered smartphones didn't exist yet. Instead, I watched a raven trying to open a dumpster lid. I was 20 minutes late, but the substrate's mood improved when my ticket machine froze up. After a brief attempt to reboot, I gave up and let everyone ride free. Gratis. I made it to Sands and pulled into garage. I had 45 minutes before my night shift started. I walked past the dispatcher's office. I heard muffled laughter inside and peeked in. The screen was showing a dash cam recording from Ivan's bus. You guys are morons. His massive butt was stuck right into the camera lens as the rest of his body wriggled under a seat, fishing for something. When he finally emerged, I saw it was a crumpled ticket. You guys are morons. Lovingly straightened it, rubbed it, blew on it like a pirate with a treasure map, and carefully tucked it into his driver's bag with 10 others. I decided this wasn't the best time to sing Ivan's praises to the dispatchers and went to the break room to eat my burger. I took over the next bus. A low-floor, pure German Mercedes Citaro. Unlike Slovak companies, buses weren't assigned to drivers here. I had a different one every shift. This polygamy caused physical pain for my colleagues from Czech and Slovak bus companies. Not being able to stuff their beloved ride with little flags, teddy bears, lace doilies, Christmas lights, and a sign that read, "You wouldn't dare throw trash under your seat at home," felt like a violation of the Geneva Convention. The evening started without incident. More passengers trickled in, and the clinking plastic bags with the logo of the state-run liquor store suggested plans for a wild night. And then came the first disaster of the evening. A beautiful Norwegian blonde with long hair, a slender figure, and a C-to-D-cup bus came up to me. "I love you so much. I just love you so much." Under normal circumstances, I'd have been thrilled. Unfortunately, the girl was maybe 16 and so drunk she could barely stand. I was close to the end of the line, and the rear view mirror showed we were the only two people left on the bus. "I love you, I love you. I really, really love you." She was pressing against me so hard, I could feel her breasts on my shoulder. I desperately tried to figure out how to cross my legs while driving. "You love me too, right?" "Well, you see, I'm married." I didn't have a ring, but I didn't think she was capable of high-level logical operations in her state. "Oh, that's a terrible shame." Disappointed, she shuffled backward. "That's a terrible shame." A few feet back, she stopped, spun around in a jerky movement, gave me one last sad look, and then, with a sound like a dying whale, she threw up all over the seats. 10 minutes later, I was flying to the night with the out-of-service sign lit up, the window and vents wide open despite the November chill. I tried to apologize with my eyes to the people at the stops who were going to wait an extra half hour tonight. Behind me, the liquid sloshed, and the smell slowly started to get to me. I was genuinely afraid I was going to throw up on the steering wheel myself. My first attempt to clean up the sloshing mass with a damp rag ended in pathetic failure. As soon as the rag plunged into the sludge, which looked suspiciously like rice pudding, my stomach protested so violently that I bolted out onto the field and spent 5 minutes bent over, sucking in the cold air. I brought out the big guns for battle. I stepped back into the bus, pale but determined, with the high-pressure washer they use for exterior cleaning. When I flushed the last bits out the door and into the drain, the Sataro's interior looked like they had just emptied a lake through it, with water gushing out the door. I taped off the affected double seat with yellow caution tape, secured between the handrails, so no one could physically sit there. That didn't seem like enough, so I also slapped an A4 paper sign on it that read, "Do not sit. Contaminated." Only then was I sure that some anti-establishment creep wouldn't sit there sooner or later. I was heading out for the first night bus. Norwegian cities on weekend nights looked like scenes from a B-movie zombie horror flick. Hundreds of people, making inarticulate sounds and with uncontrolled motor skills, seemingly aimlessly staggered through the streets. Or they were curled up on benches, curbs, or parked cars. Occasionally, someone sober would show up, usually a local creep trying to drag a freshly caught, semi-catatonic beauty home without stepping on the numerous glass shards or puddles of puke. The platform was full of college and high school kids. They were the biggest part of the night clientele. The night booze buses charged double the regular fare. No discounts or monthly passes were valid, so teens used to paying 12 Norwegian kroner suddenly had to cough up 50. Even though it had always been this way, every weekend I had to listen to the same complaint, as if they hadn't just blown 10 times that amount on booze. 50 kroner, that's a highway robbery. I don't get it. They smoke, they drink, they screw, and then on the night bus, they tell you it's too expensive, man. I pulled up for the next run. This late, older and more affluent groups were traveling, the kind who could afford to drink for 2 hours longer at Norwegian alcohol prices. Even drunk, they were capable of decent behavior, and there were far fewer of them, maybe 20. Thank God. It'll be quiet. It wasn't. At the third stop, a group of loud, confident teens got on, who apparently missed the previous departure. The moment I started driving, I heard the sound of ripping tape from the back, and a wet squish. I tried to suppress a wicked grin until my cheek muscles cramped, and even then, I didn't completely succeed. One of the teens was trying to impress two girls, and when his seduction failed, he started calling them cuss words. He was clearly not friends with a dictionary. When he was finally screaming at the entire bus, I slammed on the brakes, pulled over, put on the hazard lights, and went to have a word with him. While local youth felt comfortable challenging Norwegian drivers, they were afraid of foreigners because all Eastern Europeans were violent criminals and maybe even cannibals. During our brief discussion, I deliberately overrode every single R to sound more like a Hollywood evil Russian cliché and played with my stun gun. We quickly agreed that the best thing for him to do was wait an hour for the next bus in the fresh air. I dropped off the last passenger. Theoretically, I could turn around and head back to the garage. I was tired, my back ached, and my contacts were irritating my dry eyes, but the contract rules were unyielding. The bus had to drive all the way to the final stop in the small, remote village of Gilja, 25 kilometers away, regardless of whether I had anyone aboard or not. I pulled into the company yard and thought for a moment that the surreal scene in front of me was a dream. An empty bus was standing by the fence with the engine running and the high beams on. And on the other side of the fence, a guy was kneeling with his fingers hooked into the chain link. He was naked from the waist up and screaming inarticulately at the front of the bus. My dazed, idling brain tried to process the situation. I finally concluded, not my fucking job. I parked, handed in the keys, and walked like a sleepwalker to my car. My next shift started in 7 hours. January 2008. The NetBus company moved the drivers to a new location, the town of Honfoss, Ringerike district. The training here was handled more economically. Instead of a month of driving an empty bus, they stuck each of us for 2 weeks with an experienced local trainer. My fatter was named Bjorn Cato. He was a friendly, likable 50-year-old who took his job a little more seriously than necessary. I learned where winter jackets were made in the 60s, which farm the owner of Norway's second-largest airline grew up on, where Ola lives, who used to work at the paper mill until he lost his arm, but he got a good insurance payout and goes to Spain for the winter, so he's doing pretty well. Thanks to Bjorn Cato, I became such an authority on a region that I could easily have worked as a tour guide. After a few weeks, despite the massive snowdrifts and Arctic temperatures, I felt right at home in Honfoss. Driving the city and suburban routes in this idyllic small Nordic town suited me perfectly. Coniferous forest near Jevnaker, Ringerike district. It was a thick fog that evening. Visibility suddenly dropped to just a few dozen yards. I took my foot off the gas, found a fog light switch, and let the bus coast to a slow stop. Suddenly, in the white mess ahead, the outline of something brown, horned, and as large as a billboard appeared on the shoulder. In my peripheral vision, I saw the massive beast disappear somewhere to the side. I nearly jammed the pedal to the floor with my work boot and frantically tried to keep the suddenly wild-eyed Mercedes on the road. The bus finally shuddered to a stop about 30 yards from the impact point. For a few seconds, I stared shocked at the spiderweb of cracks that used to be the windshield. Then my brain rebooted, and I took a mental inventory. I carefully walked toward the collision site, looking all around for a reciprocal attack. Next to the road, there was a swath of broken brush leading into the dark woods, and bloody tracks were visible in the snow. When I stopped and listened to the dead silence, I could hear the crunch of wood and the squeak of snow from behind the trees. It sounded like it was moving away, but I couldn't be sure. Listen, I hit a deer. I completely forgot the Norwegian and English word for moose. A big deer. Not a deer. You mean a moose? Yes, a moose. Wait where you are. I'm sending a tow truck. Thank you. And the moose, is it dead? No. It's walking around the woods, but it's hurt. But that's not good. In Norway, we have a law that an animal injured in a traffic accident must be humanely put down so it doesn't suffer. What? You're saying it ran into the woods. Well, you have a flashlight on your phone, right? Should I go look for it in the woods? And if I find it, then what? Wait, There's a lug wrench in the bus compartment. Try to hit it between the eyes. You want me to what? My mind flashed a mental movie. I was creeping through a dark forest, lit by a Nokia phone, stalking a wounded and probably pretty pissed off animal the size of a Ford Transit. I was supposed to smack it over the head with a tire iron, right between its paddle-like antlers, which had got me like a cheap shirt in the first wash. My body pumped so much adrenaline into the system that even the shock of the collision was temporarily forgotten. I even started speaking grammatically correct English. Do I look like some kind of Paul Bunyan? Ha! Ha! For God's sake, that's funny. You should get your own sitcom. 15 minutes later, 3 police officers in overalls and high boots arrived. I showed them the direction the moose had gone after crash. One of them pulled a rifle out of the patrol car's trunk, and they headed into the woods. While I nervously stared into the darkness between the trees, wondering if the cops would emerge or a vengeful, furious monster with their blood on its snout, the tow truck appeared, before the driver could hook the bus up to the tow bar. The police returned and informed me that the poor moose had run about 200 yards into the woods and succumbed to its injuries there. I felt awful. Ringwright District, a March morning. It was snowing. The road was so narrow and broken that even a typical Czech tank track leading to some forgotten village would look like a German highway next to it, although children traveled on it, and it should have been treated first. An almost untouched layer of snow greeted me. At the very first stop, the bus skidded as I braked. Curva, curva. Fucking hell. Fucking hell. I thanked all the saints that the local kids didn't understand Slovak. Hopefully, they wouldn't think to Google what the word meant. For a second, I considered putting on the chains, but it didn't look bad enough that the studded tires wouldn't suffice. I continued on. I worked the pedals as if there were eggs under them, and I gripped the steering wheel so hard I was making indentations in the soft plastic. As I approached the turnoff of the E16, an orange snowplow from the road administration turned toward me. The driver waved and rolled down his window. So is it slippery out there? My response was unpublishable. Downtown terminal. The morning rush was peaking. I saw Ivan. You guys are morons in the bus across the way and automatically ducked down in case he wanted to socialize. He had already alienated the entire group and wasn't speaking to anyone but me. Frankly, I was sick of him too. He was talking to a blonde girl, maybe 8 years old, explaining something to her with great earnestness. Ivan nodded his large head sagely. They looked sweet, like a scene from a fairy tale. For a second, I actually felt a little sympathy for Ivan. He was the oldest of all of us, 52, while the rest of us were between 25 and 35. He must have felt lonely. As I got closer, the girl smiled at me and ran off to find a seat on his bus. Hey, Ivan. Sweet kid, huh? She might be now, but just wait a few years, and she'll be the same slut as the rest of them. You can already see 1,000 dicks dancing in her eyes. It wasn't often that something knocked the wind out of me, but Ivan managed it. I opened my mouth, wanted to say something, but my brain refused to participate in the conversation, so I just closed it and walked away without a word. The same day, Netbus Ringwright Garage, evening. I pulled into the garage around 6:30 p.m. At the far end was an empty, flat parking area. I couldn't resist. I sped up the bus to about 30, cranked the wheel, and pulled the handbrake. The bus did a gorgeous, nearly 270-degree arc, and when it finished, it carried me backward for a few more feet. I hooped like a cowboy, shifted into drive, sped up, and did it again. If you never drifted a bus, you don't know what fun is. I never liked big city public transit, and didn't know why I kept ending up back in it. I felt much better driving through villages or handling charters. City transit meant too many people, often very strange ones, too much traffic, and too much stress. After a month, I still hadn't gotten used to the fact that everyone did everything they could to avoid eye contact. And if I said hello to someone, they would stare at me like I had just proposed a threesome with them and their dachshund. A March morning, a blizzard, I weaved through the streets of the industrial zone onto the outer city ring, and was cautiously optimistic. Obviously, it had been a while since the last plow, but the traffic was heavy enough to carve tracks in the snow, and the bus, after engaging the differential lock, was holding the line just fine. Unlike the Slovak transit companies, the Norwegians didn't skimp on tires. A message crackled over the radio. Due to weather conditions, in cooperation with other carriers, police, and the State Road Administration, we had decided to halt all bus traffic in the Oslo and Akershus area, pull over at the nearest stop, and await further instructions. The reaction of the substrate was immediate, tumultuous, and merciless. What do you mean we're not going any further? Why? But I'm late for work. How am I supposed to get there now? Do you have summer tires on the bus? Are you going to pay for my lost wages? 10 minutes later, I unlocked the demand-open doors, so anyone could get on or off as they pleased. I frantically searched my smartphone for more information. I looked at the photo galleries in fascination. Pictures of jackknifed articulated buses, people pushing a bus out of drift, cars scattered across the roads like giant children's toys. Same shit, different year. A half hour later, the dispatcher called back. The information on the internet is contradictory. Trams aren't running. The subway is running. Trams are running again. The subway is delayed. The subway isn't running. I got tired of sitting behind the wheel, so I walked over to my colleague in the bus behind me to see if he knew anything more. He didn't. He shrugged phlegmatically and took a bite of the sandwich. I just tell him to go to hell. An hour later, just as I was starting to worry with increasing urgency about where I was going to drain the coffee, I drunk back at the garage. The first snowplow drove past. People outside cheered and waved at him. One guy even pulled out a paper Norwegian flag and enthusiastically jumped up and down with it. Sarcasm was a deeply ingrained part of the Norwegian national character. Half an hour later, I was periodically opening the doors and inviting the unfortunates waiting optimistically at the stop to come in and warm up. 10 minutes after that, I finally couldn't take it anymore, swallowed my pride, and bolted to a nearby coffee shop, where a sympathetic owner, an Australian by his accent, let me use the staff restroom. 3 hours later, on the regional lines, where you boarded at the front door, I was in contact with all the passengers. I knew most of them were normal, easygoing people, and any weirdo was the exception, not the rule. On the city buses, my interaction was only with the oddballs or the folks who needed to yell at someone, often for something I had nothing to do with. I was just the first target. You're going to pay for my lost wages. Can you explain to me why? What does this mean? Half an hour later, I was repeating the same thing to everyone. No, I don't know when the buses will move again. No, I don't know what happened in the city, and no, we don't have summer tires. People were understanding, mainly because I let them sit in the warmth and didn't tell them to go to hell. An hour later, I got a message over the radio that if I dared, I could head back to the garage. 10 minutes later, as I coasted down a hill, I saw people leaning forward in the mirror when I braked lightly. I had to smirk. It reminded me of how old Ivan, you guys are morons, got his nickname. I'm driving down a hill, looking in the mirror at the people, and I tell myself, see, you guys are morons. And when I pump the brakes, the schmucks swing back and forth, and it looks like they're dancing. Yeah, Ivan, I guess we are. If I ever did something like that, I'd know I was burned out, and it was high time to change careers. Returning home from abroad to Slovakia was the psychological equivalent of a roller coaster ride for a guest worker. The first weeks and months, I floated on a cloud of euphoria. My bank account was full, and the prices of goods and services seemed absurdly low to my Norwegian economy-adjusted brain. I was surrounded by friends and family. And as a bonus, I didn't have to get up for work in the morning. When I crawled out of bed around 9, I knew I had an infinite amount of time for my hobbies and passions. No tight schedule, no traffic jams, no spoiled brats confusing the bus with their private taxi, living room, and trash can all at once. As I walked through the colorful autumn landscape, the nature wasn't as magnificent as in Norway. Well, even though the fjords and lakes had grown on me, This was the only place I truly felt at home. After about a month, reality started catching up. The quality of service in our parts wasn't nearly as tragic as it used to be, but it didn't take long before I ran into a saleswoman with the inflated look of an aristocrat bothered by the plebeians, or a fellow bus driver staring like a dentist at an unerupted wisdom tooth. While registering a car at the police department in Norway was solved by sending the papers by mail, it would take me 6 hours of waiting in a stuffy, unventilated hallway here. Any contact with the authorities ends with me having to pop an Advil and lie down in a darkened room. I started noticing subtle displays of boorishness. Cars parked on sidewalks so I couldn't get around them. 2-minute waits at crosswalks before someone bothered to let me cross. After getting off a commuter train, my entire body would itch for an hour, and I'd fight the urge to run to the emergency room and demand a tetanus shot. I started registering the collection of creatures in power, or those scrambling to get there, and suddenly I was glad I hadn't burned all my bridges after all. In July 2016, I was sitting at home over a game of Transport Tycoon. I hadn't heard the sound in months, and only after a few seconds did I realize that was a ringtone of my old work Nokia with the Norwegian number. I located it on a shelf under a bag of paprika chips. The number on the screen started with the Norwegian country code. Yes, hello. Good day. Is Ondrej there? Yes, that's me. I'm calling you from Tromsø. We have an application from you for employment. I couldn't recall at first, but then it clicked. 2 years ago, right before my mother got sick, they were looking for drivers to cover the summer. They sure took their sweet time. We want to hire more new drivers now, with the course starting in September. Are you still interested? I thought about it. I was interested. Oslo had driven me to the brink of burnout. I swore I wouldn't let them drag me back there, not even if they tied me to a Caterpillar 797 with a steel cable. The transportation in Tromsø is legendary in the industry. The idiocy of the regional officials insisting on buying hybrid buses unsuitable for Arctic conditions has led to a permanent transit crisis in the winter. The local carrier recruiting me now is about as popular with the riding public as Typhoid Mary. On the other hand, northern Norway is the land of my dreams. Tromsø is a beautiful city surrounded by magnificent Arctic nature. Craggy peaks seemingly rising directly from the ocean, islands connected by majestic bridges, and a network of ferries, the Northern Lights. And then 2 months of darkness during the polar night, snow from October to April, the need to put chains on the buses, even in the city center. Oh my God, and I'm supposed to go there before winter? I would have to be completely insane. No, I decided. It's out of the question. I'm up for a good laugh, but even I'm not that crazy. Hello, Ondrej, are you there? Yes, I'm here. So, what do you think? Are you still interested? Yes, of course I'm interested. You wouldn't dare throw trash under your seats at home.